You got something for your ex-wives. And if we ever are apart, let the world about something. I'm gonna go back to doing dishes. What the hell? What the hell? What is happening? Why does that happen? Who knows how this stuff works? I'm gonna drop this. I drop this bomb. Drop the titty bomb. Regular bomb. Drop the bomb right there. Put it in there. Oh, that's right. What that means, everybody? What does that mean? That means what that means, everybody, is that you can join. You can join. Let's play a little another 2 seconds of this. Back here. Keep talking over that. Second. Oh, you're here?
No, nunca he tenido el placer a ver uno en persona. Seven Dodges.
You're not learning
Chino.
enough
Gordita.
Spanish.
Come
We need to learn more Spanish, and then we can appreciate the wall. Yeah. All right. Okay, guys. What's up now? Oh, hit the record button somewhere. We're just talking a little bit. Our special guest today is my my servant and Mexican drug lord, Cole. He's in the background. I was paying attention to everything I'm doing. He's just saying, "Si, senor." He's eating his burritos in the background. See, all his shy on words generally. A little bit, a little simple. See, can't help it. Oh yeah, want to join? Oh, what's up? This thing. Oh, you.
What you painting? You got some boobs on there.
You made it. You made it from Ireland. See?
You betcha.
Yeah.
What are you painting there?
What am I painting?
Large boobs.
It's a big boob painting. Look at that. Wow. I like to call it the breather. Working on the breather here.
Are they? Those must be your most popular paintings.
This is it's going to be one of my most popular, but it's an undecided amount. It's a commission without any decision on how much it's worth yet. Just kind of doing it. But man, you being in Ireland, there's got to be a lot of big boobed women in Ireland. Like
they come in all sizes, pretty much every place I've been. So,
not that boobs are everything. They just have.
Actually, you know, tomorrow I'm taking a train out to Derry, Londonderry for the first time, and I have a coffee slash lunch date with a Scottish woman who lives in Ireland, in not in Northern Ireland, but in Ireland on the other side of Derry. So that'll be cool.
No, you cut out for a second there when you said who you were having it with, but maybe you shouldn't tell me.
No, just a woman I met.
Oh, right on.
First date sort of thing. That'll be fun though. I need to get out and meet more people. Everybody here is 20 years old, so they don't want to hang out with old guys.
Oh yeah, you're telling me. Boy, this guy, he's in the 20s. He keeps trying to get me to this youngin' bar. Oh, we're going to have a third guest. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, castironbrave is joining the conversation today. Welcome, Cast Iron.
Who is it?
Hey, are you on the chat room?
Yep, and so are you.
Oh, well, I can join you on your chat room.
Oh, well, you can just join in. It's on. Well, I'm on YouTube. Go to YouTube.
The link is in the down bar.
The links in the bar.
Well, what's the topic of discussion?
Well, I titled it "Stupidisms," but so far it's been boobs and dating. We just started in the last couple minutes. In other words, it's random. Cole, it was just turning into a 20-year-old hanging out with older people and the conflict.
It sounds like my daily life.
Is it your daily life? Yes.
It is.
All right.
At my job.
Right on. It's like all of us older folks have to suffer. The young ones.
What did you say?
I said all of us old folks have to suffer the young ones. Because
at times, and at times it's the other way around.
Oh, really? Oh man, I don't want logical. I don't want dissent. No, come on in. Join the room. Or you're already in. You're already on speakerphone. You're already talking.
Well, who else is there?
Well, barklord's on. From Ireland, and this here servant of mine, he's staying here for a little bit. He's just doing the dishes now. He's a 20-something. Anyway, that's who's here. That's who's here right now.
Is anybody else talking?
What's it?
Can they hear me? Can I hear them?
Yeah, they can hear you.
I can hear you. Yes.
Can I hear them?
I don't know. They're talking. They're talking. Well,
Hello. Can you hear me? It would probably be better if she was in the room.
Not really.
You didn't hear them?
Not clearly.
Well, you can just join in the regular link on YouTube, and then should be able to hear them just fine. Tell us the explanation.
I just turned my computer off.
Oh.
Let's turn it back on.
Yeah. Well, if you turn it back on, jump on in. It's just random. I'm just painting.
And what did you say the link was?
It's in the comment section on the YouTube channel.
Of Norris of Doc Duke?
Yeah.
Okay. 1 second.
Okay. Okay, see you then. I'm gonna hang up. Beep. Anyway. Yeah, I didn't know how your town was, if it was a pilot town or whatnot, where it was all 20-somethings.
Yeah. Well, it's college.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know if it was part of a broader city or not. And then you said Londoner, like not London, that's some city in Ireland.
Northern Ireland's a town called, well, depending on who you talk to, it's either Derry or Londonderry,
Londonderry.
City, as a matter of fact, I don't know, it's at least 300 or 400 years old, I think. It's a pretty cool town. Small.
Oh, it's small.
70,000 people. Well, yeah, not super small, but yeah, but I'm in Belfast, so there's stuff to do here, but I don't go out and social as much as I should. I'm swamped with reading, of course.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's mostly theological stuff. Theological.
That's one of my.
What's that?
A lot of propositional logic. Yeah, it's kind of. I don't know if I like it or not yet. It goes back and forth to week. I either like it or I don't like it. It's teacher's pretty cool.
Oh. And is the teacher also in their 20s?
No, no, he's probably about 45.
Oh, I see. Fair enough.
I think he's American actually, because he seems to have picked up an Irish accent along the way, but sometimes it seems like he's got an American accent, or maybe Canadian.
Oh.
I think he went to Duke, so maybe he is American.
Oh. Huh.
Yeah, Sean, butter up your boy hole and beg to be fucked. Hop up in the bed and spread that sweet pour hole.
Who's this?
We got one of those guys in there.
Buttholes.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I am. Okay, hot buttholes. Oh yeah, Sean, butter up your boy hole.
Like
Nigger 123, nigger 123, ram ranch, nigger 123. Sean, sweet butthole.
Trying to ruin a hangout for fun. It's
Sean's butthole.
They like to talk about. Thank you. Whew. Well, at least I know who my listening audience is.
Who is that? Somebody from one of your other shows?
I don't know. Some guy that was just trying to like annihilate the hangout.
A troll, yeah.
Yeah, hanging out, putting up some nasty. I mean, it's not like I didn't even want to like, put this too squared on because then it might be considered pornography instead of art.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
that would be a problem.
be careful with that.
Be careful. Yeah. So,
So what have you been doing?
Trying to file a lawsuit against my documentary guy because now he's trying to claim full ownership and complete ownership of my I don't know, films all my artwork and then claims ownership of it. Kind of don't mind it. Kind of do mind it. Problems. I have 3 outside.
He's doing a documentary about your. He's doing a documentary about your paintings.
Well, he already did it. It's already online. It's already linked to the website. But it's also a problem because it's so what do you call it? It's it's
yours.
Like utilizing my artwork and my expression. And granted, I mean, he's doing a documentary, but I hired him to do an expose or to just index my artwork. And then it turned into a documentary, and he signed a contract, and I paid him for something that almost sort of got done. So anyway, the point is, I take the guy to court because he's not allowing me to distribute it, and he's not letting it on YouTube. He's not going to let it go fully open, but he's also not going to let me distribute it. So I just have to take control. So that's one lawsuit. I got one against the driver's license division, and then I got another one against my homeowners association because I got lawsuit happy last year. The year before that, it was cryptocurrency. This year, or last year, it was lawsuit, and this year I'm back to painting. Good old painting. Some painting.
That sounds like a lot of stress.
It is, and I don't really want it. I don't really want it. But that's what was on my mind this morning. Just after I heard about Trump doing a national emergency for the wall. Of course, the good thing about being in Ireland is that I don't know how you perceive international news now, or if it's even a concern.
Honestly, I haven't consumed a lot of it, but somebody just about an hour ago told me that Trump declared a national emergency, and so I haven't really followed up on it yet. I don't know what could possibly justify that, but whatever.
Well, if he, if he sounded like he was in a panic, it would have been better. Like, oh my God, Mexicans are flooding the border.
Yeah, they're going to destroy the country, right?
But instead, he's like, I didn't get my way in Congress, therefore, national emergency.
Yeah.
But
I'm sure everybody's panicked.
Yeah. And I was just reminding Cole, the guy here, I said, hey, man, if they put up a wall, that means that we don't get to escape the U.S. We can't leave this place on foot if we need to. If you put a wall up there.
Well, I mean, maybe Mexico should declare war on the United States and say, we're taking all of our people back. Good luck. You know, what would happen if all the people actually did leave? Jesus.
Well, and I was listening to Tulsi Gabbard and just trying to think about the worldwide financial institutions that, you know, basically the monopoly on money internationally and globally, and then trying to, like, so we screw over Venezuela, and then and of course Honduras, I think, was already screwed up. Let's not get all this wrong. But then the migrant caravans. So we go screw up nations, ruin their economy to control it, and then when they want to come up here and make a living, then we put up a wall.
Right.
So I think it makes sense and a strategic way, but not. It's not. I think it's a bad move. I mean, because it doesn't justify us meddling in other countries' sovereign approaches to their finances. And but that's not what Tulsi Gabbard's on about. She's a little bit on about that, but she doesn't tie it to the banking institution. But, and I don't know how I mean, I imagine because you're in Ireland now and you're getting a sense of it, you're getting a sense of how everything is, from their economy to their people, their law structure maybe, or are you?
Well, their government, I'm in Northern Ireland actually, so it's the UK, but their local government is, I don't know the full status of it, but I know they technically have a dual ministership here, and they have to have one from each party because of all the troubles for decades, and that's part of the deal. So when one decided, or one party didn't have a candidate anymore, the other one had to step down. So there's really no top leadership out of Stormont right now. And I don't know how much of a difference it makes, really. There's, you know, it's how much does the top executive office really do compared to, you know, the rest of the governmental agencies? I don't know. But anyway, most of the problems I think here are the anxiety of how, you know, the rest down. But anyway, most of the problems I think here are the anxiety of how, you know, the rest of the, anyway, most of the problems I think here are the anxiety of how, most of the problems I think here.
Let's do that for a second, and then let me unmute her. Shit. Did I screw that up? Trying to unmute you, but I hit mute. Shit.
Is that any good?
Trying to unmute you, but I hit mute. Shit.
Is that any good? Huh. There's a weird loop going on.
I mean, maybe it's on my end. Well, I think because when you came in, then it started doing it, but I didn't know whether or not it was because you wanted to talk and do stuff while you were doing, you know, move around your place there while you were talking. Looks like there might be a cure coming right up. We'll see. Woo! Boy, oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. All right. Now, cast iron.
I think I just had to switch speakers.
Oh. Yeah, I'm not hearing the feedback right now.
She's in Nashville, Tennessee.
Nashville.
Yep.
I mean,
That's a big city, isn't it? Is there almost
you're
a
not
million
hearing the
people?
feedback, or you are.
No.
Huh. Oh. 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 Okay. Well, why do we have to?
I've got a slight delay too, which is kind of weird.
Yeah. Maybe we have to pause slowly after we finish the sentence or something like that.
Speak lightly.
Well, the topic is stupidisms. Is there anything stupid going on?
We should do what?
Is there anything stupid happening? Don't answer the question. Okay, so
Always.
yeah. Well, so
There's something stupid.
what do you think stupid lately? Can I call you cast iron? Hey, cast iron, what's stupid lately besides politics, or including politics? Where there's this hangout.
Oh, I know it's stupid. Well, this delay is really stupid right now. But
Go on, take the floor, speak.
I don't think I'm ready yet.
Oh. Okay. Well, we were just talking about Ireland and the law and how the Northern Ireland is really just part of the UK, and that people are apparently discontented probably about their lack of real influence in politics. But that might not be what barklord was going to say there.
Well, you know, their interests weren't really considered ahead of time when the voting for Brexit took place. So now everybody has to figure out how that's going to affect them, and hopefully they don't go hard border. And
are more Irish people against it, would you say, or are they for Brexit?
I'm sorry, what?
Are more Northern?
No, they're not really. More people are remaining, but it doesn't matter.
Want to leave, in other words, more people are into Brexit. Huh.
More people would rather stay in the. This is really weird because I'm getting like a weird delay.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Anyway, it's hard to say what everybody's opinion is. I try to keep my ears open and not offer an opinion about it because people can get pretty heated, and history is so awful that it's hard to really understand the feelings behind it all. So,
yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, I just meant, yeah, your conception or your, whatever you felt like the majority of the people you've talked to expressed about Brexit was all I was concerned of. I already know you're not going to be. That's kind of a given.
Yeah, they don't really talk specifically about Brexit, but for instance, I'm taking an Irish literature class right now, so we talk about different time periods and the literature that was kind of over the last 250 years or more, and you can kind of see how the identity of Irish people is almost always in retaliation to British rule, and So that's just been brewing for hundreds of years, and it's, you know, people don't let go of animosity easily. So, and it's a lot more tense than I would have guessed as an outsider. I would have never. People have, well, you know, like for instance, basically Northern Ireland is Ulster. There's a little bit of Ulster that's outside of Northern Ireland, but that's a province, or it has been traditionally a province of 4 provinces. And in some of the literature from the 19th century, they speak about it as being one of the lost children, sort of, a child that has been taken away or been captured by strangers, outsiders. And it's always very symbolic and historical and even mythological and magical, but it's always there. It's always present. The strangers are invading, taking our children, things like that.
Taking their children. Wow.
Well, or there's an old tradition of in Irish literature of Ireland being represented by an old woman, or like an old hag or a witch or vampire even, and she seduces the young men into following and protecting her at the expense of their own interests, like having families, and basically it's a call to arms to fight the invaders. And it's an ongoing theme that happens in a lot of storytelling.
Wow.
Pretty interesting, but seeing it from a literature point of view is different from seeing it from a factual historical point of view. So I could be getting a sort of a vague spiritual outlook on it more than a political, you know, like a modern day political viewpoint. But the young people in my class, they're from Scotland, Czech Republic, England, Ireland.
Did y'all have
I
to
think my neighbor.
say,
What?
"Hi, my name is Barklord, and I'm from the United States"? Then everybody stand up.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. They know I'm from the United States. From the United States.
Yeah. I was still hoping you would, you know, tell people you were the visiting professor, like you said they were mistaking you for.
I did get that for about 2 weeks. They thought, "Are you visiting professor?" Because I live in sort of independent living here, so they don't know each other.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, right on, man. It sounds like, I mean, I hope it was everything you were hoping for and more. I assume you're getting more out of the experience.
Oh, you know what happened today? I was walking to a grocery store, a bigger grocery store. It's about maybe a mile away. And 2 ladies were peering in this window as like they were wondering where the store went. Like there's nothing inside. And so they turned around and they were asking me, "Isn't there a Jamaican restaurant here? We thought there was a Jamaican restaurant." And I said, "No, that's not it. It's 1 block over this way down the street on Botanic Avenue. They're just opening it up. I don't know if it's open yet, but there's a big sign. There's a Jamaican sandwich shop opening." And so then they went, but it made me feel finally after 5 or 6 weeks of being here, I'm feeling like even locals are asking me for direction in the area. You know, like I don't have really any of the social life, so that's why I'm looking forward to going to Derry tomorrow and checking out some of the history.
See, and I thought
It is a fascinating city. But.
I thought you were saying Jew making, like it was a place where Jewish people go to meet and they make other Jews, like a dating site. But of course, it probably wasn't like a restaurant.
You thought I was Jewish?
Yeah. Oh. Well, yeah, that's cool. You know that you've you're picking up more than some of the other people. I mean, they probably weren't from that town, or maybe they were. Yeah. Well,
Actually,
good.
she lives in Letterkenny.
You keep referencing.
They have a lot of.
I need to take an Irish geography course just to keep up with you now.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's very vague, and all the town names are very strange to me. They all seem to be like anglicized Old Irish language. And surprisingly, I did not know this. A lot of young people, they actually take Irish language the first several years of their life in school. I did not know that. Pretty cool.
Oh. And I mean,
Old Irish.
Like Welsh and Gaelic or something like that? I mean, or is it just?
Yeah, it's a version of Gaelic, I think.
Yeah. Wow. See, would that be something else? Be something else to take. And do people dance street in skirts or anything? Is there any weird clogging there?
Every once in a while, on the weekends, there'll be some traditional Irish musicians just standing on the street over here, just probably because it's a university area. But
so
I don't know. It's like any place, though, very cosmopolitan. There's people from everywhere.
Castironbrave is cooking a post Valentine's breakfast or luncheon right now. She's going to have, I don't know who her guest is that's coming over. I think it's just a hand puppet.
What are you making?
Let's see. We can hear you. We can hear you still. Jada, I didn't want to use your first names, but I guess it's good. But even she.
I just made fried rice and I'm eating coleslaw from.
Oh,
that's fine. You can use my first name.
right on. Fried rice and coleslaw. That's a combo. What? So.
But, yeah, I'm sorry I'm not talking, but it's just this delay is really not helpful for.
Sure. Might look like you're digitally moving at 0.5 mile an hour. Yeah. Oh, 1/10 of a half mile an hour. Oh. Well, look at that. Oh, shit.
No, it's a verbal delay. It's the video is okay.
Right.
Hey, Mike, did you happen to read that thing that I posted on Facebook about the theology, about the Molinism, middle knowledge?
I don't think.
I wrote some really long piece. I just wrote it off the cuff after reading this article that I'm supposed to do I was supposed to do a presentation yesterday on this topic, Molinism or middle knowledge, and it got postponed because he canceled class yesterday, so I got to do it next Thursday instead. But about 2 weeks ago, I posted my thoughts on it on Facebook, and it has a moderate amount of like propositional logic, but nothing too involved. But I have to kind of use that because the person who wrote the article used that in his argument as a refutation of this so-called middle knowledge. But I was just wondering if you had read it, because I could sure use some feedback on it. I had to email to tell him that I feel like I have an understanding of him. Can you give a presentation of his extremely convoluted argument? It's like a 15-page article. So, but I have to give at least like a 10-minute presentation on a really convoluted argument that took 15 pages to write. And that doesn't seem possible. So he said, well, I'm not expecting you to comprehend the whole thing, Jim, because this is a really difficult argument. I need you to show me to like go step by step through this process. And he was really cool about it. But so he took some of the pressure off. It's just like there's no way I could possibly express what this guy expressed. That, you know, he took 15 pages of, you know,
Did you
really
link it on your
complicated.
Facebook post or?
Yeah, I put it on Facebook, and I basically went through what I thought he was arguing, and it was a very long post.
I think I
was hoping,
just to mention, I thought
it was
happened, but I don't
basically
know
about hypothetical situations. Is there such a thing as true hypothetical situations from God's point of view? Because if he knows what you're going to do, no matter what the situation is, does that mean you really have an option to choose otherwise? And of course, it seems like, you know, if you are free to choose anything, then God can't know the specific thing that you're going to do, because it would preclude you from being able to choose otherwise. And that's the basis of this guy's argument, because he goes way into detail and uses really like fairly complicated propositional logic to prove it. But my point is that since he's taking this really rigid stance, this division between God's powers and human powers, of course, if you develop your argument from those distinct powers, you're going to wind up with a refutation because they're incompatible. Those two powers are incompatible. But the point of Molinism is to blur the distinctions between human beings and God, such that God's temporality is synonymous with part of human temporality. So I think that that's where the logic, it's a valid argument, but it's not really sound, because he's missing the point of Molinism in the first place. And so anyway, I hope to be able to communicate that in my presentation, but I notably lead the class through all of the ins and outs of this guy's. It's crazy.
Well,
anyway,
I think
it's
an interesting
strange to step in.
And I think that what you said about the temporality is also interesting. I mean, the idea of, you know, the man's relationship to God through biblical texts, you know, and then the presumptions of philosophy yield this notion of omniscience, and then modern logic to, you know, make discrete parenthetical cases of what could be the case and what couldn't be the case, and it attempts to also, you know, like kind of try to sit in the eye of the omniscient, given the perceived limits of the boundaries, or in the distribution of what it means to be omniscient, or you know, all powerful, so to speak. So even the triad of all good, knowing, and all powerful, I mean, that by itself is problematic. So anybody that's trying to philosophize around the edges of that is going to take one route. But as far as formulating an argument, I mean, it sounds like you have something you could say on it for 10 minutes easily, in terms of, you know, just your critique about it as an argument. At the same time, yeah, and it does seem dependent on some form of temporality, or register of temporality relative to what it means to have free will. But then you could
well, here's this guy's his example that he uses is, let's say there's an academic advisor, and he wants to give a grant to a student named Elizabeth. But the grant means, if she takes the grant, it means that she's going to South America, and it's kind of a dangerous assignment that she's given a grant to do. And so he's wondering to himself whether or not, if he offers it to her, will she accept, or will she reject or not accept? And so he presents the argument, well, if she's offered, she will either accept or not accept. And God knows, let's just say that God knows that she will accept. Does she have the freedom to not accept. That he starts there. And in my mind, he doesn't need to go any further with that argument. To me, of course, the word free is dependent upon being able to do one.
Uh-oh. We had a little interruption there.
He doesn't stop there. He says, now let's say we didn't necessarily offer this proposition to Elizabeth. Let's just say that we haven't offered her the grant yet. According to middle knowledge or Molinism, God knows whether you would do it or not, even if you were not offered. He knows what you would do in that situation. Now, to me, it doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't matter, because the same situation holds true, that in a hypothetical situation, even if God knows what the answer is, it still means that the person is not free to choose otherwise. So in my mind, this means that Molinism can't be true. But the thing is, I think that the point of middle knowledge and Molinism is to actually blur the distinctions between, such that God's mind comes into and is synonymous with a certain amount of human knowledge, so that they can have their cake and eat it too. They can have omniscience and they can have free will of the human being. That's the point of it. So, but if you keep those powers distinct, of course, according to logic, it's going to come up with these antagonisms. It's going to be impossible, logically incoherent. But he goes into all these ins and outs. I got a ton of shit written on it. I was supposed to just present a bullet point or some kind of an outline for it, and I did, but then at the last minute I was going to trash it because I was just so sick of it. I was practicing my presentation, and I felt increasingly schizo. Like, how can I sit here, like, if I say, well, God knew I was wearing this shirt today. He knew I would wear a black shirt. But if I would have woke up 10 minutes earlier, would I have just changed enough that I would have worn a different shirt? God knows. If I would have woken up 5 minutes earlier or an hour earlier, he knows which shirt I would have chosen. And those are the types of things that I'm supposed to, like, really? Is this a real question?
It's counterfactual in that if this Molinism, which I haven't studied, I mean, the idea of, okay,
are there true counterfactuals?
Right. A true counterfactual. See, that's a good way to put it. But they're relegated to strictly some domain of logical argumentation, and since it's a counterfactual, I think you could come in, meaning what one side's got to give or the other to some extent, meaning either the definition of what knowing is, or a definition of what free will is. Seems as if there's some sort of migratable categories between those two.
The way he wants to define the freedom of the agent, and there's actually more involved with that too, but he wants to say that it has to be possible for the agent to bring about the truth of the alternative counterfactual. And in my mind, if God knows that one is true, the meaning of that is that it is true because he's omniscient. That's, by definition, that's what it is. I mean, he goes into the details between the antecedents and the consequence. And if the antecedents change, they are not the responsibility of the named agent. Only the named agent can be the cause or not the cause of, but is able to bring about the truth value of the proposition. But they are not responsible for the entirety of the truth value of the proposition because they were not responsible for the antecedents. The advisor would be responsible for the antecedents, and or God could be involved in it. And then I started getting nitpicky too, because in his argument, which I think is slightly wrong in this point, he says that we have to presume that all antecedents are God's will. And then I thought, well, how can it be all God's will if the advisor is offering the grant? Because the advisor has to be a free agent also. So progressively, as human beings interact and make choices, we're progressively less and less the result of allegedly God's antecedent context. You know,
consider the idea that like you could bring up a Bayesian probability. Oh well, the notion that God doesn't work on a Bayesian probabilistic framework, such that his notion of knowing is merely kind of a statistical data prediction of what the case will actually be. Right, but that we as humans interpret that as being totally a discrete 100% God knows, right? That's where you find that little marginal caveat, and you can try to squeeze something in there. But I mean,
here, let me.
Yeah, go ahead. Why not?
Can I read this to you?
Took off, and we'll pick it up later, lady. Soon. I'll have to get.
Was I hogging the conversation?
Well, she took off for whatever reason, probably to what was it?
She'll come back.
Well, maybe.
Probably because I'm talking about God. God's not popular anymore. Oh, so here's what I wrote on Facebook. Now, it was basically me just riffing off of this guy's argument, and I'm not using any of his examples. I was trying to think through it on my own with my own examples. So let's say that let's assume that the following statement is true. If Jim's reading lamp bulb burns out, then he will go to Tesco Express and buy one. So not B means no bulb, therefore T goes to Tesco. From this, we cannot assume that if Jim's reading lamp does not burn out, that he will not go to Tesco's Express, because B, or not B, is only one token event which leads to T. T also occurs when Jim runs out of potatoes, or when he runs out of cheddar cheese, or when he runs out of hot sauce. The consequent T has an indefinite number of possible antecedents, not bulb, not hot sauce, not cheddar cheese, and not potatoes. All those possibilities exist to go to the store to get.
Right.
So therefore, it is to say it is not the case that not P, therefore not T, and it is not the case that not C, therefore not T, and not H, therefore not T. So notice that the first assumption is true. If the first assumption is true, it does not follow that you necessarily bought a lamp bulb at B2 Tesco Express. This is because T may be a set of tokens which does not include the possibility of B2, buying a bulb at Tesco. Since and it gets worse than this. It gets worse. Oh my God.
No, go ahead.
Since Tesco Express and buying a bulb is dependent upon having bulbs with it being is dependent upon bulbs being within the set of tokens at Tesco, it is possible that the clerk at T will say that B is not within the set of tokens at T, but it is possible, P, lowercase p, that T is in Tesco Superstore, not Tesco Express. Therefore, not T, or it is not true that Tesco and buy bulbs And it is also possible that Tesco Superstore and buy bulbs. So there's two possibilities. But the way I understand it, middle knowledge means that God already knows whether Jim will choose to walk to the all the way to Tesco Superstore on Lisburn Avenue. Let's assume that God knows that Jim will walk to Tesco Superstore. Does the possibility P exist that he will not go to Tesco Superstore? If so, then it is true that he will go to Tesco Superstore and possibly not go to Tesco Superstore. In other words, God knows Jim will walk to Tesco Superstore and has the option not to go to Tesco Superstore if he doesn't fucking feel like it. He has given Jim the choice to not go, but has created the antecedent circumstances such as the need to read at nighttime in the with a also having a burned out bulb and having a burned out bulb. I'm sorry.
God functions as the case boundary, right? Whatever, like that's the standing for the notion of God knowing. It's the rule boundary. Like, okay, if this is what will happen, and then it's not what will happen, is, you know, it's kind of like if there's a rule of grammar to follow and there's a breach of the rule of grammar to follow, is what's said in the first rule of grammar correct? I mean, that's a bad analog. But it's basically God is always supplanted. The omniscience of God is supplanted, it sounds like to me, as a rule that you're looking for the exception to that rule, and you're looking at how. And so of course it makes sense. Everything that you said that he said, meaning if you're going to go to the store, by showing up to the store at some point, it doesn't mean you went there for bulbs, right? And if you don't go to the store and you went to another store, if your light bulb burned out, you know, that's not going to the store. And so, I mean, you have it's just really simple.
You could get the light bulbs at a different store.
Yeah, you get the light bulbs at a different store. I mean, that the whole idea is that, I mean, the logic seems really pretty basic. It's the inclusion of what it means for something to. But once again, your argument. I think the argument boils down to what is defined by knowing, and what is defined by freedom. Meaning, agency is argued as the freedom to choose, and knowing is somehow a defeater. Like, if somebody knows you're going to go to the store, it doesn't feel as if that necessarily is a prediction. Like, there's also the idea of the temporal concurrence, right? Like, well, how do we test that God knew that I was going to go to the store, right? You could contest the one person or the one entity.
I think you're right, though. The boundary is that God knows it, that it is true. Because it's not just that God knows it. We can throw that out. We'll just say that the assumption Jim goes to the store and buys a bulb is true. Or Elizabeth, if she is offered, she will accept. The assumption that is true. If that is true, does she really have the option to not accept? I mean, is she? I would think that if the definition of freedom is that she has it within her power to bring about the truth value of the second proposition, then it's incoherent. They're not compatible at all. You can't. But I just don't think that. I mean, it's terrible theology to try to hold both at the same time and have the two things actually be distinct individual things. There's God here, and then there's human beings here, and they don't share any of the same powers. I think that the purpose of Molinism is to have that overlap so that God is shares in the temporality of human agency, and that they're not distinct. So, but that's not included in this guy's argument. So I can't really bring that into my own view. But
the history of, like, part of the weirdness with God, right? The whole conversation with something that is above and beyond and more powerful than is the distinction, but of to what extent does humanity have access to the intent of this creator and the knowing,
Right.
and then what's excluded, right? What's excluded out of the human knowledge set. And so it's definitely even a logical argument is going to be a unilateral, humans against something that once again can't be scrutinized. And so, but that's been the problem the whole time. People want to say, oh, we know what God was thinking because of X and Y exegesis or X and Y revelation, something like that. But then at the same time, they also have to know, and so basically the domain of the scrutiny is within whatever they consider having a knowledge of what the mind of God covers. And so that's an obvious limitation there.
The premise, I think that the problem that they're running into when this, I think this was might have been a 13th century.
Yeah,
I think it's Luis Molina or something, but he says God knows all true propositions. Because he knows all true propositions, if we can come up with counterfactuals or hypotheticals, in some cases we can think of counterfactuals that really seem very likely, like we can think of them as being the case, being true. And if they are true, then God knows them, because by definition he knows all true propositions.
Well,
he doesn't know things that are not the case. He can't know what is not so, because God wouldn't bother. He doesn't know things that are not true.
But see, and that's the problem there, and that would be a conception of God. You could always bring up the idea that, and I bring it up in my book, is the idea that God also knows all false propositions, right? Just for comparison's sake to that which
just because they are temporal, they're temporal hypotheticals.
Many of them are counterfactual. Many of them are impossible, but kind of more the idea that meaning it's starting with the premise that rationality is a subset of irrationalities. And so if God knows all true propositions, just for contrast's sake, he must also know that which is all false propositions. That's my personal theology.
Okay.
Right. But anyway, I'm just throwing that out because
so when your conception of time, like in your conception of time, do you subscribe to like block time? All possibilities do exist and we only temporalize or actualize some of them? Is that part of the solution to this?
Well, the argument to say they exist then brings up the idea of like parallel universes, which one can conceive as being the case, but you never get to reference those
Right.
unless it's as an abstract. There's no empirical pointing, right? And so, but yeah, I would say.
So in what sense can we say that it is a true proposition for us, though? Because normally we assess truth value by the fact that they present themselves in the present tense. A future tense thing could be possibly true, or we could say generally that they are true, but they're not concrete, not like a scientific truth yet. But if something is true in the past, that has a different sort of truth value than a truth that's present to us.
Right.
But,
well, I mean, I think you're going to be pocketed just by going to school. You have to have some sort of domain of clarity in which to get through this work. But I mean, personally, in one big way, I think it's kind of mental hogwash, but it's a good mental exercise to go through.
it is, well, yeah, it is good mental exercise, except for that I was practicing for so many days in a row trying to make my presentation be coherent, and I could not do it. I couldn't make it through 8 or 10 minutes of this without just not just stumbling. He doesn't care if we stumble or have to look at our notes or anything. He wants us to do that, but I get so disoriented
Well,
that I
it
can't follow with the argument, or I can't articulate it.
Right. It sounds like you get a grip of the argument. I'm trying to argue around what's being presented, but I don't know. I mean, it sounds to me like you're taking the general side of the person loses their agency of God knows, in this particular case. And
well, my stance is that perfect omniscience is incompatible with a free agent in that sense, but it will always appear to the agent as if they can choose whatever they want. It's just that God knew that you would do that. But if you're going to say that God really did know that, then I think that there really was never an option, and so it kind of depends on, are you arguing from the point of view of God being temporally, that the future is temporally indeterminate, or are you arguing from block time that there is definitely an option that will be chosen, and the agent does not have the ability to make the other proposition?
There's a term,
because if God knows what it is, how could you possibly act otherwise?
How about the phrase "underdecided"? Right? Or I mean, it's used often. Yeah, I mean, in certain cases, an underdecidability comes into play. Like how, because you're basically, the retention of the argument is that God knows everything, right? That's kind of the basis, right? And so if you suggest that God doesn't know everything, then you're violating the premise that he does. But then you could just bring up the idea that God knowing everything is underdecided in this particular case, right? Like, is he all of a sudden fall with temporal bounds?
Well, God withdraws some of his omnipotence with respect to the free agent and allows for free will. But if God has knowledge of what you're going to do, see, I think that the reason that they came up with this theology was obviously to have your cake and eat it too. You got to keep both things. You have to have personal responsibility for actions, but it also seems that the refutation of this is a terrible way to approach theology, because it will always make the agent and God separate, and there will be no salvation experience being one with God. It's terrible. It's a terrible idea, because you're always psychologically, spiritually distinct and unable to, it just seems like at some point you got to take the rock out of your shoe, it's to feel better.
Right. And if I use the term underdecided or whatnot, and you're right, take the rock out of the shoe, but it's kind of like that, the idea, let's say the optics of God are such that he knows that Jimmy is going to kick the ball, and the ball will fly forward, right? Or the ball will lift off the ground. Let's say that's the proposition, right? Now, this says nothing about the sand, right? Now, which of the sand particles that that Jim's kicking the ball from, or Bobby, whoever X is, right, that's kicking the fucking ball, it says nothing about where those sand particles are going to fall, right? But we know that some sand's going to get kicked up with the ball, but God's optics are about the proposition of the ball. It's not about these little minute details about one of the pieces of sand being that it's going to land in this particular domain. And then you're starting to argue the difference between that which is probable and that which is detected as a probable domain for where a piece of sand might land. Meaning that the idea that they're trying to find a causal connection between someone's bulb going out and them going to a store, right? The whole thing is dependent on that. And so that the idea that God knows everything might be God knows everything, but he's really only caring about some greater overarching telos, and that this minor description is not, it's not to be evaluated in terms of cause or effect. Hence, God can retain a type of omniscience, but the details of where the sand's falling or whoever's going to get a light bulb, that's outside of God's optics. He doesn't care. That's ancillary. It's a tangent. Meaning there's some ways to kind of reapproach the argument.
If it's outside of his major plan, then it's irrelevant to his knowledge.
Something like that. Like if Jim going to the store to get a light bulb is indifferent to God's overarching plan, because later on in the day, Jim's gonna, meet the love of his life or something like that, right? Then it doesn't matter whether he gets there or he doesn't get there. At the end of the day, he's gonna meet the love of the life, right? So, meaning it's the way to make the whole logical argument a contradiction, a diatheistic contradiction within a greater teleometry, a greater metric, a greater optic. But the exercise still needs to be done for all students of logic. You have to.
Yeah,
you have to.
He's not going to be hard on me. He's a good teacher, but I don't think he's going to. It's not going to come down to whether or not I express every minute detail of this guy's argument. One of the interesting things though that came out of it was some of the statements that he came up with.
I just went.
He says things like, if I can't have a book, you can't give me a book. And then he starts giving many examples of that type of thing. I forgot how it was relevant to his overall argument, though. That's where I stumble, like connecting up his strange logical reversals with the overall message. But then, and the last page, when he summarizes his position, he goes back to the original, and he says, we have to admit that, at the end of the day, if God knows everything, in what sense is the agent actually free to make the other counterfactual, to bring about the truth value of the other counterfactual? And it depends on how you define those terms, I think.
Yeah, even this book has their like, if I can't have a book, you can't give me a book. But does he mean by have a book that he owns a book, or does by having a book,
I went through that permutation too. Sometimes to give a book means a permanent ownership status, and sometimes it means a temporary thing. But if I can't have a book, you can't give me a book, right?
Well, now I would say that
you can't give me a book because I can't have it.
Well,
it's impossible.
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole idea is, if you just break down that argument, right? Meaning you have to then attack what it means for one to have, and is giving the same thing as handing. If I hand you a book, can you have a book? And if you're like, well, if the book means I don't own the book, right? Then there's basically the slight
different ways of having.
Right, there's different ways of giving, and there's different ways of having. And so there's this kind of discrete outline of what the case is in order to relegate what is possible and impossible. So always start off with the idea. If you start off with the anything's possible idea, then you always have to renegotiate the terms, right? Or you have to investigate the word itself that's being used, right? When the argument runs into conflict, I created a stone so big it can't stop, and there's the one that won't move, and they're hitting one's hitting the other, right? That type of thing. Then kind of like the idea of, like, okay, if the object that can't stop bumps into the object that doesn't move, does that mean that when the one object hits the other one, it can't slow down and veer and ricochet? And does that mean that the object that can't move can't internally vibrate? Is that what that means by it can't move? or does that mean it has
Yeah.
to hold an outside
Different
spatial
way.
position?
Well, or you could define it immutability, and that comes into play with obviously with theology too, because for a long time various theologians say immutable. Like I suppose it probably starts with Parmenides, but immutable
Yeah.
is problematic for a creative God because there has to be at some point some kind of motion that occurs, and also if you have an immutable God, first of all, you have to have a positive evaluation of immutability, and that's not necessarily the case because you could also value dynamic processes. You can, you could describe immutability as stagnant rather than in a positive way of indestructible or something. But
It,
sort of an anthropomorphism, I guess, to prefer immutability over mutability.
right. Well, and
But
God became angry.
also,
There's showing a mutation in God's emotion. Something
right.
like
I mean, there's plenty of examples in the people that argue against immutability. Obviously, just look to the Bible and say, well, God interacts with human beings all the time. Obviously, he changes his mind. He's got different plans. He talks to people. He does shit. He's not immutable. And so that's why actually a lot of these guys are trying
to character.
God
is immutable.
Yeah.
Then meaning they're even gonna jump out of the reservation and say, well, no, we're referring to God's character, or God's underlying, approach to things.
It is a person.
But
is a person that you have a relationship with. Obviously, it's not an immutable, abstract, philosophical God.
I don't know, man. Listening to Velas by Philip K. Dick, and that guy speaks to me more theologically honestly than Bible thumpers do. I mean, I get something out of some. I get something out of philosophy. I get something out of abstracts. But I mean, Philip K. Dick is talking about a pink beam that shines into his head, and plasma. And then you get to escape the planet into your immortality type of things, and that rings more. I mean, I'm rare to use the word true, but it rings more true as kind of a holographic universe where the historic dogmatic approaches to the Bible or books, that the idea that God is immutable because the text is printed as a specific ink. The ink's not going to travel, therefore God's immutable. Something almost like
immutable as a word. Sorry.
What's that? No, go ahead.
No, just immutable in the written word not changing. It's there for all time. I was thinking more like the abstract completeness of being. Like when I think abstractly that way, it seems to me that it has to be true that everything is complete, because how could, I can't conceive of everything being gone, because then I would not be thinking of anything. But when I think of a singularity, it also doesn't seem possible that there could be any sort of relational motion, because it's one. There's no movement.
Right.
There can't be any conception or experience or temporality with the one object, because there's no relative motion with one thing. And there are some approaches to theology, I think, where they, God is withdrawing from himself in order to experience himself. And temporality is a willful limitation in order to experience the becoming and all that kind of stuff. But
well, and yeah, I mean, you're already advancing the conversation from the domain of where your professor probably would like to keep it, but he'd probably also like you to be able to ramble on for 10 minutes. Just meaning even if you just spoke about what you believe the problems with the problem are,
Yeah.
And brought up even what you're mentioning there, meaning he's probably looking for greater context. But if it's a logic class specifically, then you have to find out,
it's a theology class, but this particular article, he has a specific argument, and it really shouldn't be that difficult. It's basically 4 sections in 15 pages. I should be able to reduce it down to 10 minutes with some clarity. But the problem is when I start to, I can't just keep it to a verbal argument. I start to get in that headspace of comprehending what the fuck the implications are. And then I start, I start getting into like altered state of consciousness and I can't hold it together to say what I mean.
I'm going crazy.
Fucked up.
That's how you start.
Well, and there's only 12 people in my class, and I think they're all crazy Irish people. So I told you about the one guy. He seems to be pretty cool. He's like, he is a propositional logic sort of nerd, geek nerd. That's his specialty, I think. But he seems to be, this should have been his topic. He should have taken this one, but we didn't know what the topics were ahead of time. So.
Oh, so is this just you talking about this topic, not a bunch of people?
Yeah, I have to present the material to the fucking class.
Oh, well, then just lay
all the presentations. I'm the first person to do a presentation for the class. It was supposed to be yesterday, but it got pushed back. But
dude, I was just ripping through the wiki, and then just give some synopsis points and just talk about the dilemmas of it. It sounds like you articulated fine.
His argument is pretty much, it's pretty convoluted, but it's not so much material that I can't condense it. But I have done a few Google searches and YouTube searches, and his refutation of it is not anywhere else to be found. His main refutation is this allegedly classical article from like 1972. And I think it's the standard refutation of Molinism. A lot of people reject it. But honestly, if you reject it, you also reject the fact that God plays some kind of role in our temporal experience. Well, I don't know. Probably don't know enough theology to make that claim. But
you got the deist argument, you got the cessationists being the ones that believe in interjected miracles, but that those once occurred, but they no longer occurred. But so it's kind of a different,
And they're continuously everlasting occurring, right?
Well, and
they like things like Moses parting the Red, it's happening all the time. It's a miracle.
Well, but we're too busy watching politics on news to notice that we now live on a cubed Earth. I wouldn't get caught up in your own head with regards to the work that you have to present, but you also want to be able to, let people in the class know who you are. So, I would maybe start, if it's going to be a 12-minute presentation or 10-minute presentation, like maybe the first 5 minutes just kind of talking about the brass tacks of the problem and explaining it, and then the rest.
And he's fine with us, like asking the class for, like, if you're unsure about what this particular part of the argument is, how it's related to the rest of it, you can ask the class what they think, ask questions and have them ask you questions. So that's part of the deal. Mm-hmm. So it should be a learning experience. It's not like I'm supposed to be an expert of it, but I'm certainly not an expert. I wish I would have taken another. I just chose one randomly on the first day of class. So whatever.
Well, I wish you luck.
It's only 10% of our overall mark, so it doesn't really fucking matter.
Yeah, don't fuck this one up then. That's huge. 10%. Boy, oh boy, you got it in. Let's solve this. Got to hit it out of the park. Once again, anyone listening, know the link's in the description. For all, how many viewers do we have? You want me to say?
Help me solve the refutation of Mullen.
Oh, we got.
What have you been doing lately?
What's that?
What have you been doing lately besides painting boobs?
Oh, what I've been doing lately. Boy, what have I been doing lately? Well, most recently, I got back into falling off the wagon, and I went to this thing called the White Party, and basically it happens. It's kind of like the end of winter thing, but it had an underwater theme. So I made these mermaids out of Barbie dolls, and then I hung them to myself. That was how I decorated for it, and other people were dressed as mermaids, and there was a Poseidon and some mermaids and some people underwater and pirates, and it was just kind of this weird theme party that was really cool, but it also cost like $40 to go to, which, not that that was murder or anything, but people have had other group parties that might have been more eventful, but they really staged this one well with lots of decoration and lighting and even building a half a ship, sculptures. Like, they put a lot into it. And it's their main fundraiser for the Utah Art Alliance. And so that was fun. But in order for me to stay up, and actually enjoy it, I had to be a little bit numbed. I had to numb my body and going into some peppermint schnapps. And that was 27% alcohol. And and then
Deceptive.
after that was me falling off the wagon. And after finishing up all this, had some the end of some probationary period for a DUI I got into last July. I had to go and finish up some classes and take some piss tests and so forth. So I did all that. That's all good. I'm kind of ironed out there. And boy, what else? What else? Yeah, boy. Art shows. The last one, we had to move everything up a couple days, so a lot of people didn't show up, and then I fell off of this scooter. Since I can't walk much, I got this land scooter, and since I can't drive, I have this land scooter. Let me tell you about this scooter I have. And anyway, the kickstand fell off, and it's just one of those like street scooters, electric scooters. But I end up on day of the art show, I end up turfing it because this lady's coming out of a parking lot, and I'm trying to dodge her, and I fall off and I land on my foot, and I end up in the emergency room the whole night. And but that's over. I got a boot, but I'm not wearing that. And physical therapy called me, and I didn't want that. Blah blah blah. Let me tell you about all the negatives. People got it bad out there. Then I don't know. What have I been up to? Just painting boobs. Pretty much. Oh,
painting boobs.
Speaking of boobs, there's Faith to Grace in the comment section. Boy, oh boy, what you talking about?
Here?
A lot of something. Someone named I'm Rick.
I don't see your name.
Oh, it's in the comment section.
Oh, not in the group chat?
Not in the group chat. No, she didn't enter. They're on the outside. Only got 4 watching now. Oh. All right. What do we have there? Let's see what she wrote right here. And my other roommate was graveyards, and I'm probably talking too loud in the day. Oh yeah, I always wake them up and then apologize for it. And so stuff has been going on. A lot of downtime. I'm looking to travel.
Yeah.
Someone that doesn't know much is looking to travel.
This is this next week is what they call our reading week. year, and they give us a week off. At least for my literature class, I get the week off just to read. So I'm reading Dubliners, and today I read the introduction, which was really, really helpful because it tied together a lot of other Irish-oriented literature over the last 200 or 300 years, and now I'm gonna, on my way to Derry tomorrow, I'm gonna read the first couple. I think they're only like 10 pages each, so I should be able to get. The first one is Sisters, I think, and I'm really looking forward to it because I remember back in the early 90s I read a couple of these, but I didn't read. There's like 12, I think, and I read a couple, and I remember there was a chick that I worked with. Her name was Stacy. And I'll never forget her because I started reading Dubliners in order to impress her because she told me her favorite author. She was a literature student at the time. Her favorite author was Samuel Beckett. Well, I had just happened to have Samuel Beckett's obituary in my wallet at the time because he had died about 2 years earlier, and I had cut it out and I put it in my wallet, and it just stayed there. And so I said, well, that's interesting. I was really into her. And she said, she was talking about Samuel Beckett. And I said, well, what would you say if I had his obituary in my wallet right now? And she said, shut up, do not. And then she wanted proof. And I said, well, I'm not going to, why do I have to prove it to you? And so then she doubted me, right? So then about a half an hour later, I told her that, I showed her that I had the obituary, the entire thing. I unfolded it. It was like, 8 or 9 inches long of all this like folded up, newspaper article. And it was just sort of one of those uncanny moments, But that's not the weirdest part of all, though. About 5 years later, it was my 5th wedding anniversary, or probably my 4th wedding anniversary. No, because it was several years. It must have been like 10 years later, but it was my 5th wedding anniversary. My wife and I were at an Italian restaurant in the Twin Cities, like 70 miles from where I worked with this Stacy. And Stacy was our waitress. She came out. It was just hilarious. She says, she looks at me, and I could tell she thought that I looked familiar, but she didn't recognize me from where or my name or anything. And I recognized her, but I forgot her name at the time.
Uh-huh.
And we shared that kind of moment that we knew each other, and we even acknowledged it, but we didn't know each other's names. At least that's the way I remember it. And afterwards, my wife asked me if I had dated her because she noticed this weird kind of exchange between us. And so anyway, it's bringing back all those memories because now I'm reading Dubliners again. That was one of her favorites.
Well, that's a great ass story, and that reminds me that I was at this bar. I just posted on Facebook that this woman posted a selfie with one of these birds that this guy staying with me got at the secondhand store when I was picking up Barbies and to make mermaids. He had this parrot. I put it to my shoulder to go out to the bar because I just thought it would be a fun prop to have. And this lady comes up, takes a photo, and she's wearing a pink knit hat. And the bird has pink fuzzy hair. So I comment how, like the selfie is really a family portrait because, oh, look, Perchy Slap, the name of the bird, has your hair. And but she knew me from before. She and I and her boyfriend at the time sat down at this bar probably 2 years ago and chatted it up. And I thought she was really great. She was pretty interesting. And when I was at this bar the other night, she shows up to get that selfie. She knew exactly who I was, and I totally forgot who she was. And so that was a little odd, but not unnormal for me to names. But I got speaking of Irish authors, the Finnegan's Wake. And
are you gonna read it? That's a hard one.
I read
It's
a little
impossible.
bit, and I was kind of holding off because I'm in this, kind of manifestation mode. And I think that, like in terms of, I mean, it's a bunch of hogwash, but it's at the same time, it's kind of fun to think about. I don't want to fuck with
Yeah.
the powers that be, right? That if I read Finnegan's Wake, that someone's going to die. So trying to hold on.
I seriously wonder if anybody has actually made it through the whole thing, but
Well, no, this guy that I know, and so there was this kid, right? And he was in his early 20s. He met me from YouTube, or he knew me from YouTube. I went down to Venice Beach, and I went to see him, and it was kind of cool to see him. I saw him in early 2011 after I fucked up my feet. This is the first town I went to, or first place I went to, and that's where he met me in person. And then when a couple of years ago, I made my way back to California, and I met up with him, but he was in a psych ward for cutting his own jugular. Like, I've never met anyone that tempted their own death. Kind of a lot of people that just cut their wrists. There's kind of that cry for suicide, bleeding thing. But this guy cuts his throat. Like, he'll slice straight through his. And he ends up getting caught on the side of the road by the policeman where he was apparently 100 feet off. But somehow they got him and they wrapped up his neck and they took him to the hospital and they put him together, and he was in this psych ward, kind of this open psych ward, a community. And he's the one that gave me the book. And he made certain to mention when we were hanging out, because they let me take him out. So we went to see some movie, Downsizing, with Matt Damon, and some California city outside of Riverside. And anyway, upon, he told me, he said, Mike, you got to realize you're going to die. You're going to die. And I said, I know, man. I know I'm going to die. I don't know when it is. And I said, now look, I said, you got to go to every continent on the planet before you're dead. Like, that's right. Like, and I said, including Antarctica. You have to go to Antarctica before you're dead. And
are you there?
Yeah, because this guy had a death wish. Anyway, did I fall off the radar? The end there. Anyway, point is, he gave me Finnegan's Wake. But I think this would probably be a good book. And I'm not really nervous about it meaning one of those forced coincidental thingies. Talking about the all-knowing God. Anyway, it looks like barklord fell off the radar. I don't even know if I'm being recorded now. And point is, I told the young man, I said, hey, look, you can leave this joint. It's an open, gated community. And then the last I heard, the guy vanished from the community, and his mom and I were in contact, and he hasn't been heard from since. So hopefully he's stowed away, and he's in the Micronesia, running on 2,000 islands, something like that. All right. Well, that being said, I'm here. Okay. So, what do you know? What do you know, and what should you know? What do you want to know? What do you want to know more of, ladies and gentlemen who are watching? Ladies and gentlemen, everything's going to be all right. Here we go. Movement. Pick me up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hang up, and I'm going to call back castironbrave. So I'm going to do, I'm going to call her up, catch up with her, and thanks for the hang, everyone. Stupidisms. Maybe I'll retitle the video. Stupidisms and boobs.